they've somehow created this entire narrative that Trump and his supporters are all racist and violent. Meanwhile, there's very violent people in Portland right now beating up just regular Americans. It's a real mess because the media, more than anyone, has divided the country because the media has made the right seem like they're racist, and it's not true.
Hey guys, before we begin this interview, a shout out to this video's sponsor, Noble Bitcoin. Like the interview you're about to hear suggests, it's time to think outside the box for ways to protect and grow your hard-earned money. Headlines like these are just the tip of the iceberg because the whole world is now on the Titanic. Horror in Ghana as a third of banks shutter, sparking unprecedented bank run. You think it can't happen here? Then why do so many experts believe that a U.S. economic crisis is imminent? Last week, the spread between the U.S. 2-year and 10-year yields turned negative for the first time in 12 years. It's an inversion of the yield curve, which should not happen in a healthy economy. Protect your life savings with a Bitcoin IRA from Noble Bitcoin. What you might not know is that you can now put Bitcoin into an IRA or 401k rollover, which means you'll get all the advantages that go along with it, including tax breaks. And although cryptocurrencies are not for everyone, it may be worth dipping your foot in the pool because the growth potential is astronomical. Even Goldman Sachs is now suggesting to its clients that they should consider buying a little bit of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is gaining traction with established financial institutions like banks, investment companies, and even governments around the world. So maybe it's time to examine the opportunity in Bitcoin. No agenda, no funny business, just a grown-up adult discussion with Noble Bitcoin about your options. So give them a call, 877-646-5347, or click the link below this video to get more information. Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so very, very much for tuning in. It means the world to me. It really does, especially as Google and YouTube continue to change the rules in the middle of the game. There's no longer a level playing field on YouTube. Everybody knows it, even President Trump, who is saying today that Google should be sued. We're going to talk about that and much more with my longtime friend, Daniel Amaduri. He's the co-founder of Future Money Trends and the author of a new book with the most contrarian title of the year, Don't Save for Retirement. And he's donating all proceeds from the sale of that book to the Whale Sanctuary Project. So if you buy the book, you're also giving back and helping to save some whales. Daniel, how are you?
I'm doing great. And first of all, I love your audience and love your show. But for the listeners who helped, maybe if you were a millennial like me or Gen Xer and you wrote letters back in the day when Free Willy was freed, that's the group I'm partnered up with. So they're really trying to make an impact for orcas and whales that need help.
That's fantastic, man. Well, we'll talk about the book in a second. How did you get into this idea of wanting to help save the orcas? We're all pro-whale at this point, honestly. I think the Japanese have just announced that they're going to start whale hunts again. It's just absolutely absurd. These are beautiful, majestic creatures. Boy, it kind of gets me, I want to talk about atheism now. I don't know how you can look at the beauty of this planet, Daniel, and think it all happened by accident. Look at what's behind you. That's a stunning, stunning view, man. And so tell us, is that why you got into orcas and whales here? Because you get to stare at the beautiful ocean all day?
I think it has some tie to my father. My father and I, he would really support what I wanted to do. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a SeaWorld trainer. So we actually found, that the orcas hang out in Vancouver Island. He drives me up there 26 hours in a Buick Regal, camping along the way. And he took me to see these orcas in the wild. And I've just been obsessed over helping them ever since because I feel like animals don't have a way to make money. So literally, it's on us. Like we need to be out there. And this specific group has had successful rescues. In fact, if anybody just Googles Russia jail, whale jail, we played a big role in helping get those 9 orcas and 87 belugas freed. And this is the same group that's trying to do it now. And just my heart and soul and everything, I feel like this is my purpose in life is to really help these animals. And these are for ones that are either injured and need rehabilitation or perhaps even ones that come from a theme park and need rehabilitation to have a successful journey back into the wild, just like Keiko, or as many people know him as Free Willy, was able to do.
Well, that's fantastic. I'll put the link to the book, which we're going to discuss, below this video. Do you want to tell people how they can get the book? It's titled Don't Save for Retirement. Now, honestly, that is the most contrarian title I've ever heard. And boy, I'll tell you, this generation that's trying to retire now, these baby boomers, a lot of them are struggling and they didn't save enough for retirement.
They had the best setup ever. Best stock market, best bond market, best real estate market. I mean, literally, the peace dividend, they had so much going for them. Low interest rates continuously falling from the 80s. And according to Vanguard, who hosts a lot of these 401k accounts, the median, so you're not skewed by the average of some guy who has 10 million. The median is $58,000 for 65 and older in a 401k account. Even people who had the best setup ever, this entire thing is falling apart, and the conventional retirement has failed. Now, for your readers specifically, we set up a link called futuremoneytrends.com/freedom. And if they'll go there, they can read the intro and the first chapter free. And the intro starts off with me and my wife in a bankruptcy attorney's office. I'd love for your readers specifically to read that, because I, am also heavily involved in the gold and silver world, and I've been a big advocate of owning precious metals. So I feel a strong connection to your audience. And honestly, this book is perfect for anybody who's looking to prepare for the crisis that's coming, because the real preparation and the real solutions aren't happening at the ballot box or even in many of these other movements of just awareness. It's the person in the mirror. Ultimately, the best preparation is what you're going to do financially to protect and prepare your family.
Yeah. Well, they say do what you love and the money will follow. And, you're right. It is funny, though, that so many of those baby boomers, they missed out on the biggest bull market in history. It's kind of lost on me as to why that would have happened, Daniel. What were they doing? What were they thinking? I guess it's just nobody ever really believes they're going to get to be, 70, 80 years old. Nobody just thinks that day's coming, but it's coming for all of us.
It's that conditioning, too, of getting a 3-decade loan, of getting a 5 to 8 year finance loan, of buying a car that's equal to your annual income. So the baby boomers made a lot of mistakes. They had a horrible savings rate compared to the generation prior to them. And the generation prior to them, they actually had great interest rates in the bank. They had pension funds. They didn't even have the 401ks, the generation prior to the boomers, because these 401ks and IRAs and all these things that people think that have been around forever, the legislation was in the 70s, implemented in the 80s. And of course, now we're seeing the end of that experiment, fast forward 30, 40 years. Okay, so how did it work out? It didn't at all. Yet everyone's like saying, double down. You need to save even more, buy more Vanguard, blah, blah, mutual fund stocks, and just, hope and pray that it's going to go up and, everything's going to be fine. Everything's normal when it's not. So the book actually was originally inspired. My wife and I were doing my will and trust, and we're like, we have everything set up where the kids go if something happens to us, where the money goes in case something happens. And I was like, what about the kids? Like, they don't know what to do. And so it was like, okay, here's what you need to do. Here's like an instruction manual. Here's your mom and I's journey. And here's everything we did. Here's how we saved money. Here's how we were frugal. Here's how we made investments to make income come to us, or literally multiple streams of income. And it became an instruction manual for my kids that ultimately became the book, Don't Save for Retirement. And I think it's the perfect book for the younger generation. This book will help anybody, whether you're 70 years old or 20 years old. But specifically, if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, man, you can totally turn this ship right now with the change that you don't have to keep throwing your money away in retirement schemes.
Let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the economy, the US dollar, gold, cryptos, Bitcoin. Oh, by the way, as it pertains to Bitcoin, I think you're one of the first people. I've watched your stuff for a long time. You had the video channel, the YouTube channel, Vision Victory. You probably still do, right? Early on back in the day, you were posting videos about gold, precious metals, the economy. But I saw you do a video years ago describing Bitcoin, talking about Bitcoin, and showing that you made a purchase with Bitcoin to get electronics. At this point, with Bitcoin at $10,000 USD, you probably would like to have those Bitcoin back.
That's very true. And I actually am one of the people who lost some Bitcoin. I had money invested in that BTC-E exchange. It was a Russian exchange. Anyway, the 2017, can't even imagine how much they were worth. That entire exchange was taken down by like several organizations from the U.S. government. And I'll never forget, I went in 2017 in January in Florida. I went to the DOJ prosecutor who's in charge of crypto prosecution. And I said, hey, my crypto was just sitting there. I've never done anything wrong. I don't know what these people who are running the company of this exchange did, but can I get my crypto back? And they literally said, no, you'll never get it back. And that was a hard lesson. It's like many things in life. Here I am telling people, like, make sure you keep the crypto, outside of an exchange. Here's the instructions on how to do it. And here I'm being lazy, and some were there. It often reminds me of, like, you'll tell people, hey, make sure you sell when a stock, goes up, or make sure you put a stop loss. But here you are, you'll probably lose 90% of your wealth in a stock because you're not doing what you should be doing. So that's what happened with crypto. I was like, man, I taught all these right things to do at Future Money Trends and the YouTube channels, and here I got a ton of crypto stolen from me.
Well, and the point that should be made here is not that Bitcoin is bad. It's just that when you keep it on an exchange, it's a little bit like we say, Daniel, and I've said it for so many years, if you don't hold silver, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. Same with the physical possession of gold. If you don't hold it, you don't own it, because there's been so many derivatives created. There's so much counterparty risk to what people see as being gold held at the exchanges. Nobody knows who owns what. So if you take personal delivery of your Bitcoin, right, in your own wallet, with your own private address, that Bitcoin can't be touched or accessed by anybody else. Just as if you take physical possession of your silver or gold and you lock it away in a safe deposit box, well, that may not be the best idea with the banks as fragile as they are, but in a safe or wherever, it's yours. If you hold it, you own it. That's the lesson with Bitcoin, crypto, silver, and gold. What do you think the price of gold and silver is telling us right now? These things are starting to move up.
I think a lot of the things that guys like us have predicted and expected is playing out, and it's playing out in a big way, because when you consider the devaluation, the open devaluation, it's not even a conspiracy. Like, if you watched the SGT channel from 5 years ago, it laid all this out, and people would have said, that's crazy talk. These countries aren't going to get into a currency war and devalue their currencies. You're never going to hear the President of the United States advocate for a weak dollar. But it's all playing out. I mean, the President of the United States attacking the Federal Reserve, really laying blame where it should, as far as a lot of the messes that we have in this world at these central banks. Their grand experiment. We talk about the retirement experiment. Talk about the grand experiment of experimenting with the entire world on this monetary policy and quantitative easing. So it looks good. Now, the interesting thing about the gold market, whether it's a confirmed bull market, which very smart people, much smarter than me, like Rick Rule, believe it is a confirmed bull market. But I'll tell you, I have spoken to several bullion dealers now. I have spoken to a broker outside of that is one of the most popular resource brokers in the world. And everyone's telling me the same thing. The retail guys are not in there. The gold guys are saying, the physical gold bullion dealers, not only are they not seeing the smaller and retail investor come in, but they actually saw some selling during this move. And then on the stock side, on the mining shares, they're not moving into mining shares at all. Now, the producers, what's shocking, when you think about a producer who has $1,000 cost of gold and now they're making $250, or they were making $250 of profit. Yeah, at $1,500, the cost hasn't gone up a penny. They've doubled their profits, yet the producers aren't moving. So I think there's a big disbelief. So either this is a big false fake, move in the gold market, or it's going to be such an epic bull market that we're really literally at the very, very, very beginning, like the national anthem, not even the first inning, because even the gold bugs want nothing to do with this gold bull market. That's a good place to be in. We have an uptrend, and this market is hated. So my gut, I so desperately want to believe that this is going to be a solid move for gold, and I do believe that, but I say that with hesitation because, I was totally faked out in 2016. I thought it was going to be the big move, and we're going to have a 5-10 year bull market, and we didn't.
Well, one thing that we know for certain is that the spending isn't going to stop, right? The spending by the U.S. government will not stop. That's the exact same problem all over the world with all of the nation states. So what we do know is that our fiat currency will continue to lose value and essentially hyperinflate when priced in Bitcoin, for instance. And if gold and silver traded as freely as Bitcoin, perhaps the numbers of gold and silver, the prices would be far, far higher than they are already, but we are seeing them do quite well this year. Now, the overspending theme, as far as the U.S. government goes, that's a theme that we can really tie back into your book because people overspend. And I think that's one of the key points in your book is that there's an overspending problem and we're all part of it.
We sure are, because most people perceive things as normal. Like, oh, my car is $50,000 and I make $50,000. Or I'll just sign up for this 3-decade loan for a house, and I'm probably going to move within 5 years anyway. So a lot of us have subscribed to things that we perceive as normal, but it's really gross overspending. My wife and I, when we really wanted to cut spending, I Googled, where to save money, and they would tell you to switch your checking account or switch your credit card and all these basic lame things like not drinking coffee or at Starbucks or something. Now, look, if you really want to save money, you can move, and it might even be beneficial to move away from these highly populated cities. When you move, I saved money on my housing expenses. Then we moved out of state, left California to Texas, and then we really saved money. We saved like 50%. But we did crazy things too. I mean, we stopped eating meat for a certain time for about 18 months. We actually got rid of our pets who had medical bills. I mean, we cut down to the bone in order to just not be poor. We were like, forget trying to be rich. We just want to not be poor and really protect and preserve. And it's really what kind of put me on this journey of wealth building and learning things that what the rich have done for thousands of years, or what the largest institutions. We talk about government spending. Think about people who invest in a 401k. They defer one of the lowest taxes, income taxes, since 1931 in exchange to speculate that the taxes will somehow be lower in 20 years from now. The debt will be totally out of control within the next 10 years. The deficits are already now looking at $1 trillion in perpetuity. So you consider that this isn't getting any better. Taxes are going to get way worse. So why in the world would you want to loan the IRS money? Some of these things that people are doing, it's because everyone else is doing it. And that's one of the things I really focus on in the book, is taking a step back and saying, hey, what do I want? What am I doing with my financial life? Like, we've all just been programmed to spend and save for retirement, do all these things, when in reality, that's not what the rich are doing. There's a great book, I can't think of the title, but it talks about Wall Street and how this guy goes to where all the bankers and Wall Street guys have their yachts. And he says, where are all the clients' yachts? And that is exactly the situation with retirement. The people making money from the retirement scheme are the fees and the vehicles and all these different ways to suck money out of the middle class, when they should not be blindly speculating in the stock market.
That's interesting. Where are all the clients' yachts? That's funny. Let me ask you this, though. Actually, let me just play devil's advocate on one thing you said. I personally wouldn't talk anybody out of participating in their 401k, particularly if they're lucky enough to work for one of the very few employers left out there that gives you $1 for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar match. So in that case, you're doubling your money. And you can't turn that down. That's the best deal in the world. But as it pertains to retirement, the contrarian title of your book, Don't Save for Retirement. Are you saying retirement is a scam? Because none of us want to work forever, and none of us can work when we're 90 and have a hard time getting out of bed. So what do we do with our money? Can you be a little bit more specific?
Absolutely. And retirement, in its today's sense, the plan to get there is absolutely a scam. Now, if somebody wants to retire at 40 or 70 or whenever they want to, that's fine. Just know that 65 number, it was 70 when the Germans brought out their national pension system, and then another politician was trying to lower it. So he's like, hey, we'll do 65. So I mean, a lot of these things in our heads it's really absurd why we do some of the things we do. But as far as retirement, the saving for retirement is a scam, in my opinion, because I don't think you're going to make it there. I don't think you're going to get there in a successful way. Even high incomers who live like peasants are barely getting there as the boomers who had the best setup. And even when they do, imagine saving money for 30 or 40 years, getting rid of your active income, and then saying to yourself, okay, now I'm going to spend life and relax. Are you kidding me? You'll live a life of scarcity. Who the hell wants to spend? And it's like pulling away chunks of meat. So what I advocate for is what the rich have done for thousands of years, what the largest institutions like banks and insurance companies do. And that's what 90% of your efforts, instead of investing and speculating that maybe the 401k will be worth more in 20 years or 10 years or whatever it is, buying things that preserve your wealth and bring in income. So when I invest in things, and I bring up very specific things in the book, like certain real estate investments, not physical homes. If you want to have a physical home, for sure, but equity funds that have been available to the rich forever, that are fully available to the middle class, but they're not even advertised to them. But you're looking for a lifestyle of every time you go to the mailbox, I'm expecting a check. Every time I check in my checking account, I'm expecting an ACH. And what I've done is I've surrounded myself with passive income, with cash flow, backed by hard assets. And it's not anything new. It's not a new idea. It's simply what the wealthy do now. It's what they've always done, is surround themselves with real assets that bring in cash flow, not fugazi assets that, hey, I hope it goes up. And meanwhile, they're taking fees that will take a third of your gains.
Let's talk about this idea. It's in chapter 8, at least the title of which is Turn Your Hobby into a Business. And it's kind of what I said earlier in the interview here. Do what you love and the money will follow. So many of us have heard that. Is that still easy to do? Can you just explain that? What's the best way to make that happen for people? It just seems like it's hard to do in this world because we got to pay our daily bills.
Sure. Now, when you said about the investing part, absolutely. Like Wall Street has conditioned us to always give our money to them. That's crazy. Like, don't constantly reallocate your capital, your hard-earned savings, to give it to Wall Street. They're just going to fee it to death. They don't care what happens to you. They just want that cash. Now, when it comes to monetizing your job or your hobby, hobbies can be monetized probably better than they could in the past. You have all sorts of freelance websites that allow you to sell your skills or advertise your skills to people who might want them. It's $10 to start a business at GoDaddy. And then you can also start all these things like blogs and YouTube videos. People are making money with Instagram now. I mean, so there's a lot of things and a lot of things we can utilize to embrace a freelance economy. I mean, I got rid of my car actually in May, and I've been talking to Uber drivers every day, and I'm fascinated with some of them really like turn it into a business, and they're making great money. Other ones just do it casually, and they're kind of frustrated. But anything you want to monetize, especially a hobby or your job, it can be done because of the internet and because of the different apps that can take payments, and it makes it very simple for many of us that aren't tech savvy. I know I'm not. And then when it comes to your job, I've given this advice to several people, and it's worked for many. Where if you work for Intel or some large corporation, it might not work. But if you work for a small employer, let's say 50 people or less, more than likely the owner. And if you approach them with the proposition that you'll make less from them as an independent contractor, you'll get rid of the workers' compensation and all these other insurance vehicles and things that employers have all of a sudden become responsible for that they're really not responsible. They shouldn't be responsible for. And you're going to work from home. You're going to get them the same job done. It's going to be faster. They're going to save money. That will get any small business owner's attention. But then you make them your first client. So now your employer just became a client, and that frees you up to either use your time for other things you want to do and enjoy. And it frees up your time if you want to take on another client or perhaps monetize a hobby. Maybe you can be part-time at your current job as making them a client and full-time as a yoga instructor, whatever the heck it is that you love to do.
And that's the key. You got to do what you love. And again, if you do what you love, eventually the money will follow. I mean, in terms of building a business on YouTube these days, I think it's a little harder than it was 5 years ago because, again, Google and YouTube have changed the rules of the game and they want to prop up the mainstream media. Now, clearly, I have it out for Google and YouTube because I've been personally affected by this assault on truth. Yeah. But this brings us full circle as we want to talk about President Trump and the 2020 elections. I want your thoughts on this. President Trump tweeted out on Monday, wow, report just out. Google manipulated from 2.6 million to 16 million votes for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. This was put out by a Clinton supporter, not a Trump supporter. Google should be sued. My victory was even bigger than thought. Boy, if we can't trust our elections because big social media giants are rigging the elections, but they want us to think, by the way, Daniel, that Russians are manipulating the elections. If we can't trust our elections, we're in a hell of a lot of trouble here. Listen, man, if we don't bring Google and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter to heel, if the government doesn't, if something's not done about this, I don't know, under Section 230 or what, if they're not brought to heel, they will steal this election in 2020.
No, and it's very depressing and frustrating because everything's going against Trump. And now they're doing this racism thing. I went to Barnes & Noble yesterday, and I was so angry. I almost grabbed all these magazines and walked up to the manager because I was so frustrated. It had Newsweek. It's out right now if anybody wants to see Newsweek. And it's Trump in the middle, and it says, these are very fine people. And it's him surrounded with Nazis and white nationalists. And the fakeness and the propaganda is overwhelming. And I really feel like you, Sean, if Trump doesn't get this corrected, it's done. Because think about if Hillary won, we would have never gotten to any of these problems. Epstein would still be out, sex trafficking young females. You would have all these crimes within the FBI. It would have only compounded. I mean, as corrupt as it is, it would have gotten even worse. But I have to assume that was probably the last close to a real election that we'll have, maybe 2020. But look, they're going to be able to frame candidates with AI, voice recognition, even their faces now. And with Google controlling the internet the way it does, I mean, they're controlling the entire narrative of the human race, the human population. It's honestly disgusting what's happened, and it's very scary because I really do feel like this is the last election that will be honest. It could be potentially close to honest because they're already probably ballot stuffing the machines and dead people voting, legal aliens. So you've got all this going on, and this is it. We're down to the last 18 months of Trump. So and now I do believe he will win re-election, but if he didn't, it is down to the last 18 months. And then so if Trump doesn't get on this stuff quick, like this Russia collusion stuff, I hope AG Barr does something quick about it because the clock is ticking on us. This is it. Once Trump's out, the deep state is going to make sure this will never happen again. I guarantee you, never. They will never allow something like a disruptor to come in.
Yeah, we got to see some deep state arrests. We have to see some perp walks. This Jeffrey Epstein thing, everybody's outraged about that because nobody buys the official story. Nobody buys the official story. And I guess Attorney General Barr just fired the head of prisons over that death of Epstein, supposed death of Epstein. Hey, real quick, I know we only have a few minutes left. The magazine that you saw that made you mad, what was that, Newsweek? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was Newsweek. It was Time or Newsweek, but I'm pretty sure it was Newsweek. But yeah.
All right. Well, look, you're over the target because President Trump tweeted just the other day, the failing New York Times, in one of the most devastating portrayals of bad journalism in history, got caught by a leaker, that they are shifting from their phony Russian collusion narrative to a racism witch hunt. So that's what they're doing now. You're right. We can see it coming from the mainstream media, and we can see it coming from all these corrupt Democrats, all these leftist presidential candidates. All they can say, all they have to sell the American people is that Donald Trump is racist. Don't they have anything good to sell the people, Daniel?
No, they don't. And they went all in on crazy. They went all in on this. And what's very frustrating is, as you know, there are people being beaten up for wearing Make America Great Again hats. You know, they've tried to claim that the AOK sign is racist, that Betsy Ross flag is racist, Frito is racist, that wanting a border. And what's wrong with wanting people to come through the port of entry? Seriously, what's wrong with that? But somehow it's racist. Meanwhile, anybody who's been outside of the United States, this is ridiculous. This fantasy, the liberals live in a bubble. Think about it. They worship Denmark. Denmark has one of the freest markets on the planet. Every year it's voted one of the top freest markets. First of all, they built that country on capitalism before they implemented an ounce of socialism. What made that thing great was capitalism. There is no such thing as a poor country becoming prosperous through socialism. Only countries becoming great with capitalism, and then they often switch to socialism. But it takes the capitalism first to even get there. And they've somehow created this entire narrative that Trump and his supporters are all racist and violent. Meanwhile, there's very violent people in Portland right now beating up just regular Americans, and then calling African-American police officers coons and Uncle Toms and all these things. I mean, they just spew racism out of the racism just spews out of the left. But meanwhile, they pin it on these Trump supporters who I don't think any of them care about what your sexual identity or gender or whatever or race is. No one really cares. They're simply trying to fight back against this oppressive globalist nightmare that the whole world has had to go through the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah. And, as you address what's going on in Portland, you're talking about Antifa. And of course, they're masked cowards that throw cement cinder blocks at school buses filled with those that oppose their views, and they get away with it. We don't see many of them getting arrested. We don't see the mainstream media crying out about them being white supremacists. By the way, most of those folks causing that trouble happen to be white, while on the other side, there's so many Hispanics and blacks that support Trump. But the narrative we hear from the crooked mainstream horror media is that we're all white nationalists. And I just made a video about this the other day, Daniel. They always put the word white in front of nationalist. when there's plenty of Hispanic and Black nationalists. What's a nationalist? You love your nation. You want border enforcement. You don't want your nation to be given away to those who don't care about it or its constitution. But they make it an ad hominem by putting the word white in front of nationalism. So their narrative is very, very transparent, and I'm glad you and I got a chance to talk about it today. Your thoughts on that, and then we're going to just tell people again about the book, with all proceeds going to the Whale Sanctuary Project. The name of that book is Don't Save for Retirement.
Yeah, I would just say this. When you travel the world and you realize that other countries, it's very hard to even open up a bank account if you're not a citizen. It's impossible to immigrant in most places. Meanwhile, the United States happily accepts a lot of immigrants, millions, and we've done very well by doing that, by taking that entrepreneur and pioneer blood and making them American. So it's done very well. But what we're fighting is illegal immigration with the Trump people. And meanwhile, Denmark, this country they worship, they look at what they do. They don't accept any immigrants. They're not accepting any migrants. They've got closed borders. They're a nation state, all the same race. There's zero diversity of anything. So all these places the liberals worship, it's all fugazi. And then this idea that Saudi Arabia and these countries that they defend somehow are going to give women and homosexuals rights. I mean, literally, like the United States is the best advocate for these things. And these countries, these liberals worship, Venezuela. I mean, are they treating women right? Were they ever? Iran, same thing. So look, it's a real mess because the media, more than anyone, has divided the country. It's unfortunate that the left and the right and can't meet even at a dinner table and talk anymore because the media has made the right seem like they're racist, and it's not true. But getting back to the book, again, for your readers at futuremoneytrends.com/freedom, I please, many of you have known me from my years on Vision Victory, which I haven't done videos in years, but read the intro. My wife and I started a bankruptcy attorney's office. Read the first chapter, My Definition of Wealth. I would love for you to read it, as well as you'll get a weekly wealth digest. It's basically everything that my wife and I went through to get to where we are today.
Yeah, and guys, just a real quick note here. All proceeds will go directly to the Whale Sanctuary Project. So that's a pretty cool thing. Daniel, I really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much, Sean.
Yeah, my pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for your support. A shout out to my patrons. When I say a shout out, I really should say thank you from the bottom of my heart. You guys, the less than a fraction of 1%, are helping keep us in the game as YouTube demonetizes every video and interview I put up immediately. And then even after asking for manual review, they say, yep, verified, not suitable for advertising, despite 98% likes on all these videos. Evidently, they think you guys don't buy stuff or go shopping. Guys, thank you so much. And for real news 24/7, you can also visit us at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda and mainstream media lies. Thanks for watching. God bless. Bye-bye.
I'm here to tell you that socialism leads to desperation. It leads to indignities. It leads to hunger. And it leads to death.